That's right. Presented by the On Time Experts. It is a brand new edition of the Love the Star podcast. Great to have you in. And I'm Eric Chiafalo alongside the Super Bowl champion, Brian Broaddus, on the heels of the Cowboys disaster in Denver. We get to look forward to another team that has the Cowboys number. I believe it's L's in 7 of the last 8 opportunities versus the Arizona Cardinals. And we'll see if Kyler Murray's able to play. He's been banged up, but we know how he feels right at home at AT&T Stadium for all those years in high school and in college and in the NFL. That is a place where all he can do is find victories. Broaddus, good morning.
Good morning there, Eric. How you doing, sir? Yeah, we moved from one difficult opponent through history of the Cowboys to another difficult opponent. Well, there was a time back in the day. When the old St. Louis Cardinals, when I was growing up in the 70s, the St. Louis Cardinals were at times not very good, and then they got a team where they had guys like Jim Hart and Roger Worley, and they had some Pro Bowl type players. They got a little better, and then they moved that team to Arizona, and then all of a sudden it was there was some things going on there where like it was they kind of got after the Cowboys a little bit, but then the teams kind of started fading a little bit and still get after the Cowboys. So kind of a unique history when you play against the Chicago, St. Louis, and now Arizona Cardinals.
Broaddus, of course, reporting live from the Crown Global Media Studios. Make sure you give him a sub on the YouTube there, doing fantastic work as always. And he will be giving us a breakdown of the Arizona offense coming up here in just a few minutes. But just doing some Cowboys housekeeping here, Broaddus. The defense once again being as bad as you could really ever imagine. They're dealing with the injuries, of course, in the secondary, and that is a big part of it. But, I mean, they made Denver look incredible. Denver's an offense that doesn't trust their quarterback generally, hasn't run the ball all that well. They throw the ball at the line of scrimmage at a rapid rate. They throw screens all the time. And Sean Payton looked at the Cowboys defense and said, no, even Bo Nix can have a beautiful day through the air, pushing the ball down the field, and the run game can get going because it's a get-right game when you play this Cowboys defense. You still have the Trayvon Diggs situation that's lurking. You have the trade deadline that is lurking around the corner. And I don't know where the Cowboys are at right now. They're kind of denying any idea that they're going to be in the mix for anything. Jerry Jones with Sean and RJ on the Cowboys flagship 105.3 The Fan saying there's no deal at all that he can see right now. Do they want to trade for a linebacker? No, not at all, but possibly so. So they're playing that game right now. We will have Jordan Schultz, NFL Insider, on our show in the G-Bag Nation later this Wednesday afternoon. And if you missed that, we will put that in the Love of the Star feed, so you can take a listen to that as early as probably later tonight, Wednesday night, and get the scoop on where things are at as we stand now under a week from the NFL trade deadline. But where are you at right now with this defense, Broaddus? And in terms of, I mean, hey, shout out to the rookie, Donovan Ezeraku, who is starting to come on. But the defense is so bad, we can't even really enjoy it and appreciate it. But I did want to give a tip of the cap to the rook, Ezeraku, who's, he's been really solid in the run game for much of the season, but then all of a sudden now you're seeing the pass rush stuff. He got after Nix a couple of times, and that was really, really encouraging. But how are you approaching this defense now, Broaddus? And anything you want to see different?
Yeah, I mean, it's being different, Eric, would probably require some better health. We need to, better, the return at some point of Overshown. We'll see what the situation is with Butler, and how that all kind of plays out. They're going to need to get some healthy bodies back. I was reaching out to some guys this morning, just kind of trying to get an idea. We'll see that likely that any type of, and this is going to sound terrible, but any likely improvement will probably be with guys coming back. I just don't. We'll see if what the trade deadline builds here. We'll see what there's always the anticipation that, oh, hey, we're going to do something. We're going to be out there. We're going to. Me personally, I think the trade deadline, and we had Shireen Williams on yesterday at 105.3 The Fan on the G-Bag Nation. I thought she made an excellent point. Trade deadline is not, it's too close. It needs to be further back. They need to move it back, another maybe 2 weeks, because right now, with all the parity in the National Football League, even teams like the Cowboys at 3-4-1 feel like that they're still in it. They still have a chance. And there used to be a time where if you were a couple games, 2-3 games below 500, that you were like, well, this is not going anywhere. So, teams just aren't interested in moving. Dallas, I think, would be interested in trading and trying to help their team. But is everybody else willing to do that right now? And that's the big question. That's how I think that it would be a nice way to fix your defense if you can trade, and then you could also get those injured players back in the mix. I think would be big because at the Denver game, the secondary wasn't even, with the exception of Bland, it just wasn't even really an NFL secondary. I mean, they really, really, really struggled. Denver did a great job of attacking your secondary. They did a great job of attacking your run defense. Obviously Dallas is in a really bad spot. Coaching has something to do with it. The way the players are playing has something to do with it. I don't know. I don't think there's any quick fix, but I think there's some options, if they want to go that route, and the options being to try and convince somebody to give up a player or two. And I don't know if teams are necessarily interested in doing that right now.
Yeah, I mean, as you look at it right now, I would say the New Orleans Saints, the New York Jets, the Tennessee Titans, the Cleveland Browns, the Miami Dolphins, perhaps even the Giants, even though they're in your division, so maybe you cancel that one out a little bit. And then even Vegas with the Raiders sitting at 2-5 right now, they would be picking 8th overall in the draft. I mean, those are teams that I think for sure at this juncture should not be delusional enough to think that they should be feeling confident that they still have a chance to go make a postseason run. So those would be at least a handful of teams. And they did push the trade deadline back. They pushed it back by like a week, maybe 2 weeks.
It's like 2 weeks. And and to Shireen's point, she was like, they need to probably move it back another 2 weeks. Maybe you carry this thing into, like, now, could a player come in and make a difference? Sure. The way the NFL season is right now, you're through 8 weeks, but you have 9 more weeks. I mean, you could get an advantage if somebody comes in. I know that when we won the Super Bowl in Green Bay, we picked up Andre Rison like halfway through the season, and in games he played, we were 8-0, including playoff games. And so there's ways to add players that can benefit you. And then, I personally, I think you feel the same way, is if you were to go and trade for somebody, you want to trade for somebody that has multiple years left. You're not looking at maybe the 10 games, on this season, but you're looking at 10 games plus what you can get in the other years ahead. So, if you were a team that, say you were the Indianapolis Colts, or one of these teams that's the Green Bay Packers or something like that, and you make a trade, because you're already at a high level, maybe you do it on a 1-year thing and just see if you can make something happen. But I think Dallas is kind of in a mode right now where they need to think about not only this year, but years to be. And it's funny, I just got a text message about like we're talking about cornerbacks and stuff, and Butler, from what I understand, Butler's ready for the Cowboys just when the coaches are ready for him. That's kind of where we're at right now with some of these players. If you look at some of the guys that they have on that injured list, maybe there's a couple of those guys that Dallas needs to think about, adding back to the roster, but the thing about it is you have to make changes to get these on. I'm just looking at my list here to my right. When you look at Josh Butler, it seems like that he's ready to go. Cooper Beebe last week, it seemed like that everybody was ready for him. The coaches weren't ready for him. That's kind of what the vibe I'm getting. Uh, Perrin Winfrey is another guy that seems to be ready. Coaches, not ready for him. So, this is the struggle that you go through right now when you're not playing well in certain spots, and you kind of wonder, okay, well, do we need to start thinking about trading guys out? Do we need? And I'm sorry, I kind of circled around with my info there with you because I just got that text because I had questions about BB and I had questions about Butler, and I'm like, okay, how can I get some guys to potentially help? And that's a little bit of shocking news to me about with the thing with BB. If people felt good in the organization about him and the coaches wanted to go with Hoffman, wow, that's a pretty significant way of playing a roster. But also too, with all the problems you're having at corner, to not get Butler at least on the active list and see what you got in him, I think is another little telling sign.
Even Kalen Carson, right? Like, how can Kalen Carson?
I mean, that's and this is where the struggles happen within an organization. When things are going along well, everything is smooth. Even the smallest little tweaks are not looked at as, oh wow, what are we doing? But when you're playing poorly and you continue to run out the same players that might be playing poorly for you, when the potential of having guys on the roster and in the waiting that can maybe make a difference in some of these games, that's when, as a personnel guy, I get a little bit like, okay. And this is the dynamic, and this is something we talk about a lot with the Dallas Cowboys, is that coaches, and I'm not against coaches. Please, folks, don't think I'm against coaches. I'm against coaches when they try and do my job, but I don't try and do their job. Now, I could be critical of like, well, man, why we calling timeouts there? Why are we not playing this guy? Why are we not? I mean, there's things you question, but I always told coaches, hey, I never called a third down defense. I'm not a third. I'm not going to, but I could find you somebody that could stop somebody on third down. Just let me do my job that way. So this is the dynamic with the Cowboys and how much coach say, and then the fact that, the Joneses wear that communication badge, like honor, like, oh, we communicate, the coaches and the scouts and everybody's, and we're all in the same. Maybe too many voices. Maybe this is where Jerry Jones needs to step up and say, no, we need to do this. Or maybe that Brian Schottenheimer needs to tell Matt Eberflus, we need to do this. There are some thoughts that Matt Eberflus has, like before the Commanders game, went in there and told Matt Eberflus, hey, we need to think about this more on defense. So that's the job and the responsibility of the general manager, and it's the responsibility of the head coach. If they're not getting what they want from this football team, or the way, hey, we need to think about playing Perrin Winfrey instead of Mozzie Smith or JT, or, we need to see some, because some of these guys look pretty good in the preseason. And the fact that we're 9 weeks into the season and we're having these problems on defense, I think, and even maybe the offensive tackle too. If you look at Steele at right tackle, are you feeling great about Steele playing right tackle? I don't. I think he's the one guy along the offensive line. You're starting to see some slippage from Hoffman a little bit. Why not BB? Was BB what was the problem there? Why does maybe the medical staff or trainers feel like that he's good and the coaches don't? Those are questions that are costing you a football game. So there's a lot going on with this team, but it really starts up at the top. And that's when the general manager needs to step in and say, we're going to do this and we're going to do this and we're going to do this. And everybody better say, yes, sir, and then march those orders. And if it doesn't work, then you try and figure out something else, because there's things obviously right now, by just letting people continue on this path, you're giving away football games.
Yeah, I don't know how you can leave some of these guys off the field right now that you haven't really gotten to see too much of, just to see, hey, can we find some sort of ingredients that can work here a little bit? Perion Winfrey is a great name to throw out right there. Monty Smith has no business being on an NFL field. I mean, Osa and Kenny Clark aren't playing much better, but
no, they sure are. But you got to try and find. To me, but that's the whole thing. They will tell you, well, coaches fall in love with their guys and they don't want to move on from guys. Instead of Mingo's the same way, Tolbert, Mingo, Flournoy, whoever, there's all kinds of moves that you can maybe make. And, does it look as panicky moves? No, I think that you try and replace or see if you have something better. And maybe some ways you do. Maybe having Carson on the field will be better. Maybe having Butler on the field would be better. These are guys that are available, and maybe they won't. But you know what? They're good enough to be on your team. You've kind of earmarked them as guys that, like, we want to keep them here. You put them in a category where, like, we'd like to use them in the future. But there needs to come a point in time where, like, listen, this is not working, and maybe we need to see something a little bit different.
Yeah, 100%. Couldn't agree more. And I think one of the big things that needs to change is just Brian Schottenheimer being much more aggressive when it comes to fourth downs and things like that.
Yeah.
You can't be punting. You can't be kicking field goals. I mean, there was a handful of egregious ones in that game. Like, Brian Schottenheimer is the only guy in the world that doesn't know his defense is a total disaster, and they're banged up in the secondary even more so. In that Broncos game, it's like, dude, you got to be, from the start of that game, you get the interception, you go down, that's 4-down territory there when you're trying to punch it in instead of settling for a field goal. And then there were some other ones throughout the game, but Brian Schottenheimer's got to be a heck of a lot more aggressive. That's something that should be relatively easy to start implementing and do your best to try and save this defense any way that you can. And it's a shame the offense has to be 10 out of 10 basically week in, week out. But that's the nature of it right now. So Schottenheimer needs to be a heck of a lot more aggressive. Can't wait to get BB back in the mix. Love the idea of maybe Nate Thomas at right tackle. But those are things offensively. Defensively, you're in a world of trouble right now. And I'd be putting anybody on the field right now who's healthy that I haven't gotten to really look at, just to see, okay, can they do anything for me here? So plenty of problems when it comes to the Cowboys defense overall. We looked at the way they draft defensive players, especially in the top 100 over the last 3 or 4 years, and they're just reaching on guys. And this is the fruits of that now. Your defense is basically dead balls last in almost every category. If it wasn't for the Bengals, you'd be 32 in all of them. So anyways, there it is. You're listening to the Love of the Star podcast. Love of the Star is an Odyssey podcast. You can find it on the Odyssey app or wherever you get your podcast, presented by the On Time Experts, the official AC heating and plumbing partner of the Love of the Star podcast, as well as America's team, the Dallas Cowboys and the Dallas Stars. And all you have to do is call the On Time Experts, and they'll come to your home the same day, backed by their Stay Warm guarantee. The fall weather here, especially locally in the DFW, it's happening. It is happening. Visit theontimeexperts.com, click the book now button, and you will pay less over time because they correctly diagnose your issue and fix it right the first time. Okay, Broadus, Cowboys 3-point favorites at home, Monday Night Football with the Arizona Cardinals. Adam Schefter says that Kyler Murray is expected to return off of his injury. They've had Jacoby Brissett playing quarterback over the last couple of weeks. The Cardinals have lost plenty of games this year, and they've lost them very, very close. I mean, this isn't a team that's been getting blown out. They've had some true heartbreakers along the way. But let's go ahead and get the 4-1-1 on this Cardinals offense.
Yeah, last night I went back and watched some of the early season games with Kyler Murray involved, and just to get an idea. And he's still that same dynamic, explosive player that we've all known through his career. He was when you watch him play, there is decisions that are made very quickly. If he feels like that he's the slightest bit pressured, he will immediately take off and run. And he still makes some crazy throws where you're like going, well, man, he shouldn't have done that, but he manages to get away with it. As we all know, he's a shorter quarterback. So what they have to do is they have to move him around in the pocket. And as they're moving him around, that gives him the opportunity to make throws on the run or to just take off and run. Where I think that's where he could be just absolutely devastating. But there's been some games, if you go back and you watch how teams have played him. For example, the New Orleans Saints was a really good example of how they got after him in that football game where they kept him in the pocket. The edges collapsed on him. He's a guy that if he doesn't get the edge on to scramble, then you could kind of keep him where he wants to move. He wants to spin. He wants to try and get out of there quick if he can. Saints earlier in the year did a really good job. I went back and watched all the sacks that teams had gotten against him, and a lot of it had to do with edge pressure, and then he just collapses in the pocket. He's learned that, if I can't get away, just get down, save my health, try and fight for another play. But man, there's some times where they've tried to run these boots, and immediately there's edge pressure, and then he just gets down. But if you allow him to have the edge or to be able to kind of duck and get up inside, then he could be devastating. But he's got some weapons at Marvin Harrison. He's got a big time weapon at tight end in Trey McBride. Those are kind of his go-to guys. When you watch him throw the ball, it's trying to get them, those two, really, really involved. This team, they lost James Conner, which really hurts them in the running game. Bam Knight has been their running back, and that's kind of not been as good as it's needed to be in a lot of these games. So it's an offense that has some explosiveness to it, but there's some things that you could take advantage of. I think that Jonah Williams, the right tackle, seems to be the best spot. When he doesn't move his feet, he could be really slow-footed. You go back and you can watch just the sacks that he gave up in the Green Bay game. Yes, it was Micah Parsons, and we all understand who Micah Parsons is. But man, he really struggled with that explosiveness of Micah Parsons. And I'm sure folks are out there like, well, that's really good to know, Broadus, considering he's now a Green Bay Packer. But if you somehow can find some explosiveness, and maybe this is Donovan Ezeraku, maybe you can find a little bit of that first step, explode, get under him, and then get around the corner, because he struggles with movement a lot. And then, they've had some problems at guard. Will Hernandez has had to step in and play some guard, and he's kind of a big, boxy, heavy-footed guy. When he's been in the games, they've struggled with movement there as far as his movement. So there are some places to attack. They would probably have given up more sacks if they hadn't. I know this, watching them, the sacks that, like Jacoby Brissett, he's nowhere near Kyler Murray. But man, I mean, Seattle got after him pretty good and was able to get some sacks that way. So the offensive line has had their struggles. They've got great skill players on the outside when you start to talk about Harrison again, and then the tight end Trey McBride. Those are the two guys I think you have to worry about the most.
Okay. So, I mean, it felt like they were better offensively with Jacoby Brissett. I mean, I know it was kind of a smaller sample size, but it seemed like their offense was moving better with Jacoby. So it'll be interesting to see how, and they're off the bye week. So, they've probably shaken some things up a little bit, and we'll see how they approach things. But it did feel like Jacoby Brissett was moving the ball much better, and they were scoring more points when he was there at quarterback. But yeah, he's not anywhere close to the athlete that Kyler Murray is.
Yeah.
So him running around is certainly going to be a threat here. So how do you approach it? I mean, Trey McBride is probably the go-to guy here. Of course, you mentioned Marvin Harrison Jr. What would be the approach with McBride? I mean, this is obviously one of the better tight ends in the league.
I think we always kind of talk about how did you give a great example last week of, or you saw a great example last week of what a team could do to a quality tight end. And I think Jake Ferguson is a quality tight end. They treated him like a wide receiver. They put a corner on him. Jade Barron was the guy that was responsible. They put some safety help on him too. They kind of mixed up some coverages. The thing with McBride is he's kind of a guy that kind of moves all over the place. So you got to be mindful of that. I just don't think you could. Me personally, I think you have to put somebody on him that can run with him and can maybe deny him the football. If you're interested in just putting a safety or a linebacker on him, and it depends on the safety might work, but it has to be a safety that could be able to cover. That's really the key. And does Dallas have that right now? Well, no, they really don't. When they just don't. And it might be a situation too, and this is going to sound crazy, but it might be a situation where you go and walk Deron Bland up on him a couple of different times, and just try and deny him that way. If you get in a third down situation, Marvin Harrison, like I say, I think Marvin Harrison is a throw the ball up to and he could go get it kind of guy. Dallas does, how do they match up with him? Do they have somebody that can maybe deny him the football? It's tough. I mean, every time you want to believe in, you want to believe in Elam, you want to believe in any one of these other, his cornerbacks, Bridges. I mean, Bridges did have a couple of passes defensed, to his credit though, that was something, but it just was a rough game for him last week. They went after him 12 times. Had 6 receptions on him. I mean, he did knock down a couple of balls. Maybe that's you're going to have to be able to play the ball, like I say, be able to play the ball down the field. This guy is a smooth route runner. So he's kind of for a tall guy, he's able to kind of get in and out of his breaks. They try the double moves with him and stuff like that. So you got to be ready for that. The out, the up, those kinds of things. They try and get him the ball down the field. But circling back to McBride, it might be where you have to kind of mix your coverage up on him. And then maybe in certain situations, you do see Deron Bland go and walk over the top of him, especially if he's detached, then you find a way to cover him up that way.
Well, we stole their guy Clayton Adams from him, and he was the architect of their incredible rushing attack over the last few years. It seems like that run game has taken quite the fall. Of course, they lose James Conner early in the season. Yeah, what do you see from the rushing attack?
It's not without James Conner. It's a problem, and but I will say this: I do like their center, and I think that to me, Foholt is, I think, how you say his last name. I do like him quite a bit. I think they've got an athletic group when it comes to that. I mentioned about Jonah Williams. I think Jonah Williams is a good athlete, good foot athlete, but like I say, doesn't play with a whole lot of power. And Paris Johnson Jr. is the other tackle. He's had some moments where he's looked pretty good, and then other moments where these tackles give up a lot of depth. When they get pushed, they could get pushed back because I don't think they're the strongest guy, but they really, really, really do have an athletic center in Foreholt. And I think that's something that you kind of need to, when he's uncovered, the pull is the second level and stuff like that. I think they've got a guy that if Dallas is going to continually overrun plays, they've got the guy at center that can kind of pin guys, and then they can make those cuts. So this is going to be a difficult matchup in that way. Like I say, if Dallas continually just way overly aggressive when it comes to playing run defense, but they having no Connor in the game has been a big struggle for them.
All right, you're listening to the Love of the Star podcast. Love of the Star is an Odyssey podcast. You can find it on the Odyssey app or wherever you get your podcast, presented by the On Time Experts. Call on the On Time Experts. They'll come to your home the same day, and it's backed by their Stay Warm guarantee. The fall weather is here, so go ahead and visit the ontimeexperts.com. Click the Book Now button. Same day or you don't pay policy for certain repairs. 100% satisfaction guarantee. No excuses, no exceptions. They are absolutely the best in the business. The official AC heating and plumbing of Love of the Star and the Dallas Cowboys. Okay, Broadus, let's go ahead and get into your Dean Julia mailbag for the day. And we got plenty of questions coming in here. We'll get to as many as we possibly can. And we will start with Dean Romans. Is Jerry going to waste these first-round picks trying to make this team better right now? Gut feel, do you see them parting with a first-round pick before the deadline?
I wouldn't say it's wasting, because if you're going to waste a first-round pick, and again, you used the words waste. I am not using a first-round pick on a player I'm going to rent. If I'm using first-round picks, I'm going to go get a legitimate edge rusher or a linebacker or something. I don't look at it as a waste. I look at it as a 10 games for right now, and then this is somebody that might be signed for 2-3 years down the road. So don't look at it as just a 10-game rental thing. I mean, there's no way in hell that he would just use a first-round pick on a guy. Now, like I said, you go out and you get a Max Crosby, long-term. You go out and get Quinnen Williams, first round, long-term. You're having years, 2-3 years with these players. That's the first-round moves he needs to make, not give a first round for a rental. And I don't think anybody in the organization would allow him to do that.
Agreed. Yeah, I mean, especially with the way this team struggles drafting defensive players, if you can get a surefire guy that you have locked up for this year and at least a couple of years beyond, then that is, I don't think that is a wasted pick unless they're trading it for a guy that is just not that good of a player. And I don't see them doing that. I mean, they'll do it they're more frivolous when it comes to okay, they overpaid for Mingo, right?
Sure.
That should not have been
Trey
a
Lance
round pick. Yeah, Trey Lance, absolutely. But when it comes to moving on from a first round pick, I mean, you see them do it. It's Amari Cooper. Okay, that's a really, really good player who's totally worth it in that moment. So I don't see them just burning a first round pick for a guy that's a rental or a guy that's locked up but is just kind of an average player. If they do that, I think they're going to be going and getting a cornerstone piece for your defense for a few years to come.
Agreed.
And we would all welcome that. We would all absolutely welcome that. I mean, there's a part of me that's just I want them to commit one way or another, either be aggressive and go try and upgrade and get some defensive players here, hopefully guys that are locked up for a couple of years. But if not, then you do have to consider getting as much as you can for guys that you can sell off right now. And maybe as crazy as it is to say, like George Pickens, I know you've brought that up, and he's been unbelievable, but you have to have some foresight and understanding of what your plan is. And sometimes it feels like they're just flying by the seat of their pants. Micah Parsons trade is a great example of that. All off season, no intention, not planning for it. And then bang, we just go ahead and do it. So they need to have a plan for what they want to do with Pickens. And if you're not going to be buyers at the deadline and maybe you drop the Cardinals game, then all of a sudden you go into sell mode. I would just like to see them be aggressive one way or another instead of just standing pat and wasting a guy like Pickens on a year where you're not going to the postseason and then he just up and leaves in free agency if you're not going to end up paying him because he's having such a monster year. David Mulugeta being his agent, he's going to get all the wood when it comes to the off season and teams going to be interested in him. So just like to see them commit to something one way or another and go for it either way. Hopefully they beat the Cardinals and it juices them up to feel like, all right, let's go be buyers here and capitalize on this incredible offense that we have right now. Okay. Justin, JP here, asking or stating, we need a new director of player personnel. Do you not agree that Will McClay has made terrible selections and reaches? Why does he keep getting a pass? We can't fire Jerry or Steven, so fire Will McClay. That's Justin.
Yeah, this is where, and I've known Will a long time. I don't always agree with Will. Will, at times, has been very adamant to me that I'm wrong about things and he's right, or it's been vice versa. But I have respect for him. I think Will McClay is in a very, very difficult job because I've been in that situation where whoever sits in that chair, whether it was who I worked with Larry Lacewell, whether it's Jeff Ireland who was there, Tom Siskowski, Tom will tell you how difficult. Tom and I are like best friends and go way, way back. It's a very, very difficult job. You don't realize how hard it is to make Jerry and Steven happy, make your coaching staff happy, and make your scouts happy. It's a very, very thankless job because there's things that you absolutely want to do and push for that are met with resistance. And there's things that you have to accept because maybe the Joneses wanted it, maybe the coaches wanted it, or maybe the scouts fought for it. It is not a job for it. It has really, you think that it has autonomy to be able to do what you want to do. It does not. And that's what makes that job very difficult. I think Will McClay is an excellent evaluator. I think where they've had problems in the past is the fact that, again, the coaches get too involved. When Jason Garrett's administration was helping with players, you saw a much better roster, in my opinion, because Jason Garrett understood scouting because of his father, and he understood and he had an eye for players. Might have been a terrible head coach, but where he was really, really good was making sure that the roster looked the way it needed to be. They haven't had that. 5 years of Mike McCarthy, not that good. I think your roster suffered. I think there were times when Dan Quinn pushed Will McClay to do some things, to draft some guys. Just go through some of those defensive drafts. Dan Quinn had a big hand in it, and Will helped him do it. Now, if you want to blame Will McClay for helping the coaches get some of their guys, because coaches, you don't want to piss off your coaches. There's some organizations that tell the coaches to sit down over there. We'll pick the players. You just coach them. Mike McCarthy came from that in Green Bay. Coaches had some say, but not to the point that you're dealing with at the Cowboys. And so that's where I think it's very, very difficult for Will. And I'm not saying this to defend Will. I'm saying it's just reality. I'm saying I lived this. I saw it with my own eyes. It is not an easy job to have to, put everything aside for the Joneses, everything aside for your coaches, everything aside for your scouts. You're never going to make everybody happy in that organization, and ultimately you have to have some give and take. And when it turns into give, and it's the wrong give, you get blamed for it, and you don't take nearly enough. And that's, I think, the biggest problem. So I think that when you lose Will McClay, I think you'll lose something that you're going to lose something that I think is actually pretty good.
Brad Wright asked the question, what percentage of the blame for the terrible defense do you attribute to Eberflus not adapting his scheme to his personnel, and how much is it the personnel messing up the scheme?
Yeah, I think there's, to me, this is where I've been very, very critical of the Joneses and the hire. And nothing against Matt Eberflus. At one time, Matt Eberflus would answer my text messages. He doesn't do that anymore. I've known Matt a long time. I've been critical of Matt. I think there's times where I've been fair with Matt. But this is about the hire. And I think this is where we're at right now with Brian Schottenheimer. Brian Schottenheimer went in there with the initially of trying to save his job as the offensive coordinator. And all of a sudden, then he became a candidate for the head coach. Brian Schottenheimer didn't have a chance to pull a staff together, didn't have names, didn't have stuff ready to go. Most guys like an Andy Reid, I remember when Andy got the job when he got in Philadelphia, Andy was prepared. He had an idea of what coaches he wanted to hire. He had an idea of guys he wanted to be with, the trainers, the guys, the equipment guys, everything. Andy had a plan. I don't think that Brian Schottenheimer really had a plan. And I mean this in no disrespect to him. I'm saying that he didn't have time enough to be able to get together the staff. Now, he had an idea of maybe some offensive guys he wanted, but defensively, this is very much the Jerry and Steven going, well, hey, how about Matt Eberflus? we liked Matt Eberflus when he was here. He was here with Rod Marinelli, did a really good job. Went to the Colts, did a good job. Went to Chicago, was not a very good head coach, but look at their defense. This is what happens when all of a sudden you have an organization that for 3 years have had 3 different defensive coordinators, and it goes back to the things I told you guys about. It goes back to the coaches have a big say in the personnel. Dan Quinn got a lot of players here still. Mike Zimmer got a few players here. Maris Leofau is a Mike Zimmer player. There are players that this coaching staff has brought here. Look at with Eberflus. Jack Sanborn. He's brought players here. Reedy Stewart. They brought some players here. So
Murray.
Murray. That's what I'm saying. You get to a point where all of a sudden you've got 3 different philosophies of defensive coaches that are here. And what happens, you talk about marrying schemes and stuff like that. This is the long way around it. This is where I look at the Joneses and say, you had players on this roster that play a certain way. And if you hire a head coach that doesn't play, or you hire a defensive coordinator or offensive coordinator that's not able to, that doesn't have, like, he's a specific scheme guy, and you have players that have been playing another scheme, is that on the coach or is that on the players? It's on the front office for not, if you recommend a guy, is this the absolute best fit for us? Mike Zimmer, he God bless him. Mike Zimmer, when I was with him in Dallas as a personnel guy, Bill Parcells says, you're going to call that 4-3 defense for 1 more year. And if you're here the second year, you're going to call 3-4 defense. Mike learned about it. Mike adapted. Good for Mike. Not every coach can do that. But this is where I also blame the Joneses for this. And I blame him in a way of, you brought in a coach that was married to a certain way of playing where your players are accustomed to playing a completely another way. You should try and marry your players to the scheme is what you should try and do. I don't think the Cowboys did that with Matt Eberflus.
No. I mean, the whole thing's bad because you hired a coach that is stuck in his ways and does coaching defense one specific way. He's not an adaptable guy. So that's a huge problem. And then also you've built a terrible defense from a personnel standpoint. Like, let's just be honest about that.
Draft's been poor in a lot of areas for defense. Absolutely.
So the whole thing is a disaster. I would say 60% the players are just not good, and 40% your coach is also just not adaptable and doesn't know. Yeah. He can't just say, okay, these are my guys, let's put a plan together. It's like, no, this is the plan no matter who we have. And we knew that when he got hired. He's always been that guy. He's never been like, oh, wow, Eberflus, look what he's trying. Look what he's doing. No, it's been a very simple defense. And when he's got really good players, it can work for him. And when he doesn't, then the defense is just not good. It's not like he's got a whole bunch of tricks up his sleeve to accommodate for bad players. But make no mistake about it, these are bad players. Okay, John Hyla Jr. Why do the Cowboys never turn over every stone to make their roster better? Teams get injuries, and the next day or two, they bring people in. Do you wholeheartedly believe the Joneses want to win, or just being relevant is really the case?
I think the Joneses want to win. I do, and you might hate me for my opinion, but I've worked for them for 15 years. The Joneses want to win. They just, the way that they operate is not traditional. It's not traditional. And I mentioned this, they listen to too many people. They listen to way too many people when it comes to player personnel stuff. They listen to people outside the organization. I'll never forget when they drafted DeMarco Murray and Jerry Jones standing up there and talking about, we got this kid because of Barry Switzer. We got this guy because of Barry Switzer. And I'm thinking, well, what about the guys like Chris Hall and others that went to Norman, Oklahoma and wrote reports on this guy? When you listen to too many people, all of a sudden it turns into, your roster is the way it is. But like I say, there's we don't know all the workouts that they have. Some workouts are reported. Yeah. Do I think the Joneses want to win? Sure, I do. But they want to win They want to win their way. And maybe we're getting close to, and I think the tone of the Joneses and the head coach was different this week. This is the first time in a long time I've heard a different tone about their team. Maybe now it is the 30 years. Maybe that weight is on them heavily, the Joneses, that maybe they have to think about, we have to do some things different around here. We have to, and maybe that's why why maybe there's a little bit of a sense of urgency for trying to make a trade. Jones says he hasn't, anything hasn't come up, but I think the Joneses want to win. I just think the fact that they've got so many people involved in the process, it really hurts the growth of the team, in my opinion. There needs to be one guy. There needs to be, to me personally, if I saw in Philadelphia, look how they're playing, and I'm not using Phil, I'm just using them as an example. Philadelphia, like Jeff Lurie, when I worked for Jeff Lurie, he was involved. He wasn't involved on the level that Jerry Jones, but he was involved in what he wanted in personnel. He said, Brian, I don't feel comfortable about this. I really like this. You see that with Howie. He lets Howie do what he needs to do. I'm sure that Jeff Lurie says things to Howie, and Howie says, yeah, well, think about it this way. But if you say you gave Will McClay the autonomy to do his job, and I know we talked about him and people don't like him and he needs to be fired, that's good. That's your opinion. I'm just saying, if you put somebody in charge like that, I think your football team would be different. I think it would be going out and trying to hunt. They always talk about 24/7 and all that. Sometimes I believe that with the Joneses. Other times I don't. It's just, it kind of comes and goes. But if you had one guy in charge that way, I would feel a lot different about it.
Couldn't agree more. That's a banger. You're on fire right now, Broadus.
The Joneses are at fault for a lot of things. They're at fault for a lot of things. And I want to believe that one day they're going to wake up and they're going to say, it has been 30 years. It has been a long time. We're not good enough. I want to believe that. I really, really want to believe that. But I might be long gone before that even happens. But I want to believe that this 30-year thing is starting to wear on them, and they need to do something about it. And maybe putting one guy in charge and having that guy be the voice and the direction of the team will be the way that turns this thing around for real.
Crazy idea. Real football guy being the general manager of your football team. What a world that would be for the Dallas Cowboys. All right. Well, that'll do it for today's episode of Love of the Star. Thank you so much for all the fantastic questions in the mailbag. Thank you for listening. Please rate, review, subscribe, send it to your friends. We appreciate you so much. Have a great rest of your week, and we'll be back on Saturday with a full game breakdown.